Hello, and welcome to Aortic Hope Survivor Series. I'm very glad that you've tuned in to this. It's my story of aortic dissection and strokes, and I hope there's something in it that helps you. That whether you are a survivor yourself or you're dealing with any other type of aortic disease, and whether you are the survivor or the caretaker and you have a loved one who's in the situation, or you're a part of the medical community and you are looking to find out more information about what it's like to be uh, dealing with aortic disease. I was 61 when I had my emergent aortic dissection, and I had been a teacher for 30 years. I had retired, and I was also a writer. And I suppose it's significant that I was very uh, involved with the outdoors, and I had been trained as an outdoor educator, which is a more physical position. I taught in the classroom. I didn't teach as an outdoor educator, but that's what I was pulled to. And so I canoed, I swam in lakes, I would run every other day. I would sometimes walk, run, and swim on the same day. Um, I was pretty active. I dug up sod and laid down new gardens, pushing a wheelbarrow full of soil, and I loved it because it engaged my body and was very physical. I have 2 daughters and 2 stepdaughters and a stepson, and so a fairly large family. And I was married to a wonderful man who signed up for a conference in Vancouver. I live in Canada. I live about an hour north of Toronto in Ontario. And we had flown out to Vancouver, which is a 4.5-hour plane ride, to attend the conference. And while my husband attended the conference, I was left to my own devices to enjoy the large, beautiful city set on the edge of the ocean. So one day, I had always wanted to run in Stanley Park. There was something about Stanley Park is a significant park for many reasons, and there's a running path along the edge, along the edge, and of the park, and so you would run by the ocean for almost the entire run. So I did that, and then I showered, and my husband and I went to dinner with, he's a doctor, a family physician, and sorry, I'm adjusting my chair and everything's moving all over the place. Okay. Um, and so we joined two other family physicians for dinner. And when I sat down, it felt as though the bottom was falling out of my throat. I heard Karen suggest that it was a pop in her throat, and I would agree with that. It was something that had disappeared suddenly. So I thought, well, that's weird. But dinner looked good, so sat down and had some dinner and a drink, and that was on the 2nd of November. On the 3rd of November, I woke up with a terrible headache, and I have experienced headaches before, and I would take a Tylenol and that would ease it, and then it would be fine. So that's what I did, but it didn't get better. I decided we were going to take a bus up to Capilano. And Capilano is a beautiful natural area north of Vancouver, and with very tall trees and a suspension bridge and all sorts of neat walking paths. And so that's what we did. And then we came back to our hotel, and we were going to go out for dinner. And I said, I think I'll just stay in the hotel room. And on on the 4th, uh, the headache was worse, but we were, so I took Tylenol again. I took a lot of Tylenol over those 3 days, and boarded the plane and flew for 4.5 hours. And then at the end of the flight, got in a car, drove an hour north home, and it was getting awful. And I just felt as though I was getting the flu. I don't, it takes me a little while to clue in when I'm getting the flu. And then I clue in and I say, oh, yeah, that's what that is. Well, that's what I thought was happening. It just was a pretty vicious kind of flu. But, you stay in bed and drink plenty of fluids, and you're going to be fine. However, I woke up on the 5th of November. So the dissection happened on the 2nd, started on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and this is November 5th. I came down from when I woke up, and I really wanted a cup of coffee, and I thought that would help with the headache. And my neck was aching, and my shoulders were aching, and my whole body felt like it was bruised. And I went to drink the cup of coffee, and then I immediately put it down. And I said to Carl, my husband, who was sitting at the table, I'm going to go into the living room and lie down. So I did. And then I gave this guttural sound, and Carl came into the living room, and I wasn't breathing, and I didn't have a pulse. So he called 911, and they said, get her on a surface where you can perform CPR. So he rolled me off the couch, and when I hit the floor, I started breathing again, and I had a pulse. It's magic. And meanwhile, our golden retriever, Cece, was very excited because there was all this commotion. And whenever I was on the floor, that was time to play. So she thought that this was just terrific. And Carl said, okay, I'd call the ambulance and they'll be here in a few minutes. My response was, oh, I better get changed so that I'm dressed for the paramedics when they arrive. And he said, no, you're not going anywhere. You're just going to keep breathing. So I followed his advice. And the paramedics went into my neighbor's house and asked what the emergency was of my neighbor. And she said, I don't have an emergency. It's next door. Get out of here. And so they came to the right door. And I vaguely remember this, but I was conscious and I was able to respond and told everybody where my ID was and so forth. So they took me to Emerge and brought me right into one of the rooms. And the ER doctor was concerned, so he conferred with another doctor, and Dr. Matt Moss, and he's a hero. He did a bedside echo, and it showed cardiac tamponade, and he suspected that it was an aortic dissection. So I got to ER around 11 o'clock. And then they asked for a cardiologist to come and have a look. And the cardiologist consulted with another cardiologist. They conferred, and it was thought that I should have a CT scan. And they did give me a CT scan, and that confirmed that I had a dissection. And a type A, ascending aortic dissection. And the cardiologist got in touch with a cardiac surgeon and in South Lake. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we experience in Canada, and I think around the world, that if you don't live in a big center, if you don't live in a city that has a cardiac unit, that has a crisis unit for cardiac patients, and maybe in the future, an aortic team of a surgeon and all of the other people that would assist and be knowledgeable about the aortic, which is now an organ. So that's very important. but I had to be transferred, and I had to be transferred to South Lake, which was 45 minutes away because traffic is always a mess. And that took time that I barely had, because at this point it was about 64 hours since my dissection started, and mortality is calculated as 1 to 2% per hour. So I I was losing time, time that would that would more likely provide success. So Dr. Moss accompanied me in the ambulance, but before that, they decided to intubate me. And once you're intubated, you can't talk. And this is hugely significant as well, because you have no agency over what happens next. And so you can't express what you need or what you want, the direction that you want to go. Um, so I was intubated, and they had difficulty intubating because my blood was flowing where it shouldn't flow, and my body was reacting, trying to deal with everything, that the shock that was going on inside. But they were able to deintubate me, which meant that they had to ventilate me in the ambulance. And they were also concerned about my heart continuing to beat. So I was being given meds that would encourage my heart to beat. And what had happened was a PEA, which indicates pulseless electrical activity. My heart was sending the messages to pump. It just couldn't. So arrived at South Lake and brought immediately into surgery. And they were draping and prepping, and I suddenly, my blood pressure um, I turned blue, and my blood pressure was not good, and so they were concerned, and when they cut my sternum open, they saw that my aorta had ruptured, and that means that the blood has worked its way through all the different layers of the aorta, and it's free to flow wherever. So I was losing blood, and um, and I just learned, this is a startling statistic, that fewer than 1% of people who have ruptured on the operating table survive. So it's kind of being part of an exclusive club, which is part of an exclusive club that you really would prefer that you hadn't had access to. They started, I was put on a heart and lung machine. My heart arrested, and CPR was applied for 38 minutes. And I don't remember the order. And that's one of that's something I live with, that I have that cognitive impairment of sequencing and remembering and short-term memory. And I will remember the end of what somebody has said, but I won't remember the beginning. So I can't remember the order of how the operation proceeded, but I do know that I was on a heart-lung machine and that I was clamped. My aorta was clamped, and that I had CPR for 38 minutes, and that my heart valve was repaired despite the tissue being friable. Mm-hmm. that's a word you don't want in your medical report. And there was a Dacron graft glued. Well, first of all, the tissues of my aorta were glued together with bioglue, and then the Dacron graft was applied, and it's a pretty significant graft. I didn't have any impairment of my descending aorta, and I was very lucky that didn't happen. And then so you know that expression of being out cold? Well, when you're in heart surgery, you really are out cold, 18 degrees cold. And at one point in the report, they say that I was drained. It almost feels like that you've gone to Mr. Lube or you're getting your transmission looked at, and all the fluids need to be drained in order to repair something. My family was told to be prepared for me to be paraplegic, to be confined to a wheelchair, and because they didn't know how I would come out of it. They didn't know the extent of the effect of the dissection. And while I was on the table, I suffered multiple strokes. And because I had the multiple strokes and the aortic dissection, it's hard to tease what the impact of one is from the other. And there are many symptoms that I have that other people who've had aortic dissections don't have. And because of the stroke. And there are symptoms that I have that stroke survivors don't have because of the aortic dissection. So it's very confusing to be able to receive or advocate for myself and know how to advocate, or to whom. Um, and that's part of what people with aortic dissection or aortic disease encounter, from what I understand and from what I've experienced. You aren't a heart patient necessarily. Some people do have heart issues as well. Um, so cardiac rehabilitation is great, and cardiac heart and stroke survivor communities are wonderful. But that's not really where you where people who are dealing with aortic disease, it doesn't fit. And it's one of the reasons that aortic hope has been a lifeline. And I'm going to try not to cry because this is where the tears come up. So somebody said, asked my husband, is your house laid out so that Martha doesn't have to climb stairs, and do you have ramps? And well, no, no, we didn't. And so they had no idea what to expect. My family was, I cannot imagine what they were going through. And it does break my heart that that was happening and that they went through that. And so after the operation, I was in an induced coma to allow my body to deal with what was going on. And they tried to wake me up. They did wake me up on the 6th. So my operation was on the 5th, and on the 6th, they tried to wake me up, but my right shoulder was twitching and it wouldn't stop. So they induced a coma again. And then brought me out of it. And the second time they brought me out, I didn't have that reaction, but my right arm, hand, shoulder had been affected and continued to be affected. However, my vital signs were good, and they didn't know if I could walk, because it's not recommended that you get out of bed when you have just come out of a coma. But when I came out of a coma, my daughter was holding one hand, my husband was holding the other, and they said, "It's okay, you're in hospital, you've had an operation, but you're going to be okay." And I smiled, and then I went back to sleep. So I remember waking up again and trying to get the tubes out of my mouth. Being intubated is horrible, absolutely horrible. It's necessary, but it feels like I felt like I was choking. And so, of course, I was going to respond and try and take it out. But my daughter was holding one hand, my nephew was holding the other. And a nurse in the background said, "Martha, don't do that." Okay. And of course, nurses are in charge, and they're going to try and protect you and so on. But it, they they are so important because the nurses are there 24/7. And when I was in ICU, it was the nurses that I saw. It's the nurses that were adjusting the drip lines and so forth. And there was one nurse that stood out, Georgia. Georgia was absolutely wonderful. She is the one who, when I had those blessed tubes taken out and was given the okay, she gave me some pudding. And Georgia, Georgia was, she was so lovely. And she did my hair. when when awareness returns to you, these things are important. Like it just having somebody brush your hair and care like that. That that matters. So it turns out that I could walk. I could stand up. I had control of all my limbs. And once I discovered that, I had a goal. And my goal was to walk up some stairs. Because apparently, if you can walk up 3 stairs, you can get out of hospital. And when Carl was talking to one of my daughters, he said, "Marty's going to be furious. She hates hospitals." And she's going to wake up in one, and that's her first response. She's going to say, "Get me out of here." And it's true. So I was in ICU in South Lake for about 7 days. And I was discharged and brought by ambulance up to the local hospital, RVH, and put on the cardiac ward. And if you have ever been delusional, if you have not been delusional, it's hard to relate to this. But while I was at South Lake, I was delusional 2 times. And the first time, we were at Singapore airport, and there were brightly colored umbrellas, and women were dressed in the 50s fashion for some reason. And everybody was drinking, of course, Singapore slings. And I was on a cot, a stretcher, waiting to be airlifted home. And at another time, it was worse. The ward was a subway, and everybody had to evacuate. But the nurses weren't letting me go. So the nurses were the enemy. And I remember sitting at one of the nurses' chairs at the nursing station saying, I'm not going anywhere without Carl. And so poor Carl had just driven home, the half hour driving home. And the nurses called him and said, can you come back? So he made the drive again. And that night, we slept in a wheelbarrow. And I felt safe because Carl was keeping me there in the wheelbarrow, holding on to me, and I didn't have to go on the subway with all of those mean nurses and doctors who were evacuating. And and as they took me on the stretcher into RVH, I went by the nursing station, and I think I winked, and I said, "Yeah, I understand." And one of them said, "What?" And the paramedics who were pushing me started laughing. Anyway, and when I was at the cardiac ward, uh, a nurse came and said, a nurse came with an intern nurse, and he said, "Okay, today we're going to remove your stitches. I love removing stitches." And they were actually the metal staples. So sorry. He loves removing metal staples. So he got out this tool and approached my chest. I thought, ah! I mean, there were times of which I felt like the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and there were other times when I felt like Frankenstein, and that I was just being, hollowed out and tampered with and so on. And I decided to take a shower. No, please do not do this in your first 2 weeks alone or unassisted. It was terrible. I could barely walk, so I think I used the wall as support. So I went along the wall with my elbow and got into the shower. And my first thought was, what if I slip? And I couldn't move. I was so disoriented while I was in hospital. I didn't know how to hold a toothbrush. I knew that this was important, and I knew that it was for my teeth, but I didn't know how to orient the thing. I didn't know how to connect my hand to the handle. And I couldn't read. When I went to read, the letters were like notes, musical notes that were dancing among strands of grass that were blowing in the wind. And I couldn't write. I didn't, nah. But everybody in the cardiac unit had to be moved out and moved into another ward. So there were more people that were pushed together. They were making room for the flu season. Little did they know, because this was 2019, and this was the end of November or the middle of November. And so I went for a walk every day, and I tried to go a little further, and then my daughter would come and encourage me to go with her. And at one point, my husband said, I think he whispered, like, this is conspiratorial. If you can climb 3 steps, you can get out of here. So that's what I did. And came back and was discharged the next day. And I went home, and I was so, so grateful to be home. So that was about two weeks. A week in ICU and a week on the wards. And it could have been longer, but I'm glad it wasn't. Recovery was there were days when I would wake up, and if you've seen the movie 50 First Dates, that's what it was like. I would wake up thinking everything's okay. And then I would remember, and the enormity of what had happened would hit me like a what do you call those big waves? Tidal wave, tsunami. And emotionally, it was it tore me apart. It it tore me apart, and then I would gather myself together, and then it would tear me apart again, and it was just a continual process of being torn apart and mending, just moving ahead. And I would, by this time we had snow, and I would go out with somebody. I always went out with somebody. And I would go out with a cane or with a pole. And I would go out for 10 minutes and have to come back again. And I would cry as I was taking off my boots. And I would pour tears because I was so frustrated. I had gone from being someone who ran every other day and was very strong to someone whose muscles were weak, and my balance was off. I would get up and I'd feel dizzy, and then I'd go to move and I would kind of lurch. I think they call it furniture surfing, where you just go from one piece of furniture to another, or to a door jam or a wall or whatever can right your balance. And uh, tired, so fatigued. I would come back from the 10-minute walk and sleep for 2 hours. And it took a lot of time of, it's taken a lot of time. And there are days when I have chronic pain, and um, there are days when there are flare-ups, and I I can't do anything. And even on good days, I will hit a wall, and it's almost funny to hit that wall, and somebody asks, "Okay, do you want to go for a walk or whatever?" And you say, "Nope, I can't," and you really can't. And learning, this is something I had to learn. I had to learn to be kind to myself. I had to learn I could be kind to others, but kind to myself, I needed to protect my body. And I needed to recognize what my body had been through. My body had been to war, had been in battle, and it was it was scarred, and it was changed. And I have had physiotherapy. I've had occupational therapy. I have had therapy, talking therapy. I have been very, very fortunate to be able to access those services and those people, um, and what they can do. And I have had trauma in my life, previous trauma, and this trauma makes makes me. I was vigilant before. Now I am extremely vigilant, and I feel as though I I wasn't aware enough. I should have seen it coming. I should have seen what was happening, eh, eh, that I was going to have an aortic dissection. I was going to have strokes, and I should have avoided it. I should have known. And so my mind thought, and my body felt, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to keep an eye out, and I will know when it's happening. So I went to ER, I think 4 or 5 times in the first year, in the first few months, and they were so good. They they gave me tests. They put me in a room. They they let me know that it was okay. And so I slowly learned to recognize what was what what my body was saying. And how to read my body better. So I haven't been to ER since the first year because I could learn what constituted a, it was a twinge. It wasn't something major. But the trauma, the PTS, is there, and there are still times that I will be dreaming of succumbing to a stroke, where I lose consciousness and I fall to the ground, and it's an awful feeling because I physically experience that in the dream. And now I know that that's a flag where, and I need to pay attention to that. There's some stress that that I need to listen to, and I think I'm on a lot of meds. I'm on a lot of meds for pain and for to control my blood pressure, and a statin, and something for my ADHD, and what else? I think that just about does it. Oh, and depression, so an antidepressant. And my understanding is that it's not unusual for people who have been through this kind of experience to have experiences of anxiety and depression. And yeah. So if you are a new survivor, hold on to hope and get a quote about hope, print it out and put it on the wall, something that's meaningful to you that will keep you going, because there's a reason to hope. I'm coming up to my 5th aortiversary, and there's always the possibility that I'll need more surgery, that I will develop something new to do with aortic disease. And I have my will in place. I have my advanced care directive written out. And because that's a possibility that we all deal with if we have been in an emergent situation where we didn't know. But if you are a new survivor, there is reason for hope. Your body is going to mend, and it is going to get better. It takes a while. It takes a while to turn a corner, but then there are going to be more corners, and you're going to be able to keep on going. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for listening.
That was excellent, Martha.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. And so everybody says hi. We're going to go through the list here. Velda says deep breathe in, soft breathe out. Natalie says hi, Josh. Hi, Martha. She gave us the heart hands.
Oh,
Right. Jeanette says hello, Velda. Hello, Natalie. Hello, Josh. Tom Basserier dropped in to say hi, Martha. Love Tom. Tom
yes.
Nowetner dropped in to say hello, all. Ken, he's a patient that's from the other side of the world, dialing in from Australia. Says hello, everyone. Hello, Martha. Thank you for sharing your story.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Donna says hello, all. Molly Thomas dropped in. Hi, Martha. Hi, everyone. Big hearts. Tom Nowetner says motivation. You were on the right road for your next new life, and I agree. I agree. That was amazing. I loved it, Felda. So very moving, Tom. More heart hands, Natalie. Thank you, Tom. How long have we known each other, Martha?
Since 2021.
Right around then? Do you remember the first time you shared inside of a support group?
I remember barely being able to sit up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't remember sharing. I remember listening.
A lot of listening.
Yeah. But I don't remember the first time. No.
The biggest mark of improvement that I get to track with you is your ability to talk, your ability to speak, your words. They were gone.
No. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that.
When was that turn? When was that corner turned?
I don't know. It was slow to happen because I am a slow talker, which is why I took up most of the time to talk. A lot of ums. See, I don't know. We do. My husband and I do, and my brother do cryptic crosswords. We did it before, and at some point, I was able to do it again.
Okay.
And that was a turning point. Being able to hold those clues in my head and come up with an answer and sort out words.
Okay.
Yeah, words are huge. I didn't say anything about the mindfulness, and that, oh my goodness, talk about turning the corner. Tom's gift of mindfulness had a huge impact.
You have a sense gone from visiting with with us to listening in on his Monday talks. And I do believe you went on a bigger workshop with him, another one that he put on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was interesting to hear um, mindfulness discussed in a different setting and how people respond to it. And there are some overlaps. It's it works.
Yeah,
Best medicine
I
ever.
agree. It's the next thing to magic that I can imagine.
Yeah.
When I hear these stories and when people are new into the support groups, very often, you're given whatever medications you're going to be given, and you're going to go back and forth with your physician and figure out what that should look like, what that payload should be. Did you have any back and forth and
Oh
medicine
yes.
changes? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was on parenteral, and one of the side effects of parenteral is coughing. And I had that. It's not what you want to have if you have had open heart surgery. I would just be hacking and I had to sit down and hack. And so taken off that, and I can't remember what replaced it. Metoprolol was challenging for me because it affected my balance. So I went from it to an ARB. So I'm now on candesartan. Working out the statins were another thing. And all of this takes time, which is part of what when I suggest keep hope in mind is it takes time because when you're on a new medication, it's going to take a while for it to take effect. And the other medication might take a while to get out of your system. So you have this gap where you're kind of stranded and it's frustrating. But pharmacists are so, I have met many lovely pharmacists. And if you can establish a relationship with a pharmacist, that's like gold because their knowledge of, and at one point, the pharmacist actually said, "Why is she on perindopril? It's going to make her cough." and, and I heard that and I said, "Oh, she knows something." Yeah, and there were other medications. I started, because I was experiencing a lot of pain and have chronic pain now, duloxetine was suggested. And I didn't respond well to duloxetine at first. But now I take it every day and it's fine. So maybe that reflects a change in, I mean, medications aren't going to be static, I don't think. I think that your body changes and your maybe your tolerance changes or whatever chemical balances. So yeah, if something is happening and you have side effects that are compromising your quality of life, then ask your pharmacist, ask your doctor, your family doctor, your primary physician, and ask for a change. And yeah, that's something that you definitely can advocate about.
That's exactly it. Self advocacy, it will save lives. And we hear about the medication troubles and support groups, and it's good. It's good for somebody to hear from a veteran, right? Yes, I had to make a bunch of changes, and another good thing to hear, I think, for a lot of people that are fresh into the community, that first year, you're gonna go to the doctor a lot. You're gonna go to the emergency. I mean, we had a decent sized support group one day, and we had everybody put their hands up for being in the emergency room more than 5 times, and like just about everybody had their hands up in that first year. And it's like you said, your body went through a war and it's putting itself back together. Being patient with yourself is probably the most important thing we can ever advocate for any new survivor. But definitely be open about what's happening with your medications. Please let your providers know. Let them make that change. You were coughing? Are you crazy? So Velda says, did you get genetic testing?
Yes, I did. And I think I had to ask 3 times for it, but I did. And it was through the UHN, which is a group of hospitals in Toronto. And they did the genetic testing. And the reason for it was to inform um, primary family members, immediate family members. And the results came back that there were no known um, genetic markers. So that doesn't mean that there aren't. It just means that they are, they may be yet to be found. Um, I also got in touch with the John Ritter Association or Foundation and signed up for the study there and had my genetic testing done. I haven't heard anything back from them that's negative, so that's. But I'm part of that study to contribute information to try and find out more about why this happens uh, and I think that there should be more testing to some sort of scan, just as you have, you know, breast examinations and you have prostate examinations, aorta. Just do one scan so that everybody has a base level at a certain age. Decide what age would be a good point at which to be able to determine the susceptibility or genetic situations that contribute to a likelihood of aortic events.
I agree. And I don't think it should just be the one. I think it should be like the rest. You know, if you have something or if they see something, then every couple of years, every year,
Oh yeah.
watching in the monitoring.
Yeah.
You know, we have in the Hangouts, we have a gentleman by the name of Stephen Freeman Jr. And he's 46 years old, and he was diagnosed with an enlarged aorta in the thoracic area. And so he's been very vocal on social media talking about what this is to him at the age that he's at. And I want to say maybe a month ago, we had that young lady talk about her making the decision to have that surgery, and she was like, and I mourned the life that I left because I couldn't do things because I had an aneurysm, but now I don't have an aneurysm, and it's like my life was given back to me and I can go and do things again. And I was so taken aback by her outlook, and that she was just adamant, I want this part of my life to be over.
Yeah.
And so we hear that, and then we balance that with the same things that we hear from our physicians when we have our live Q&As, and we don't know what the future holds for procedures, medicine, technology, and whether or not the procedure that they're going to do is outdated or what have you, or something's in the pipeline. But more importantly, if they don't have to operate on you, they just don't want to, right? Because once you've been operated on, now monitoring is going to be forever, right? So I love that lady's story, though. She made so much sense. She was like, I was trapped in my own body until this happened. And I really wanted Stephen to be able to hear that and react to that, because he talks about his aorta. He talks about it to strangers on the street, walking around with a plastic heart in his hand, or wearing a big shirt that says, this is the left ventricle and this is my aorta. And he's taking it to a brand new awareness spectrum that we're really looking forward to. One thing that Karen says on the genetic front, and it's something that I think about quite a bit, is the genetics will give you an idea of something that's happened, but it's the imaging will give you definitive results on whether or not something has taken place. And that stance is a very strong stance. So even if you are going to get genetically tested and you have first degree relatives and you are a dissection patient or you've been diagnosed with aortic disease, an echo, I think, is the least intrusive, fastest response that you can get for something that you might be carrying in your family. So remember, genetics is great. Genetics is the way we're looking at fighting the fog of war, the information that we don't have yet, so on and so forth. On the genetic front, we also know that the response times thanks to AI and machine learning, have been reduced drastically. So before, they wouldn't really want a resubmission because they couldn't do much with it. But now it's like every 5 years. If you can resubmit your DNA every 5 years, we might be chipping in to the unknown. And for the geneticists, that's like now we're in hyperspeed because they've cut the time down by a third.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, aren't we fortunate to have the possibility of, or the availability of imaging?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And when we hear the studies, right? Like a CT scan is the gold standard for an emergency solution, right? That's what you want. You have 5 minutes, get your results, you schedule that OR, you push forward. But if you're in the monitoring stage, it's okay to get an MRI. It just takes 45 minutes and you're not going to move and you're going to be surrounded by lots of buzzing and banging and whatnot. But you can get that. And if you're one of those people that are worried about CTs, and there's a bunch of reasons to be worried about imaging, but the risks outweigh the rewards by far. But if you have concerns and you're not in an emergency, it's okay for you to ask your physician to switch that CT to an MRI. They're going to get nearly as clear of an image, right? So keep that in mind for those of you that are new.
Well, and they have switched up in my situation. I'm attached to a clinic in Toronto that the doctor, who was a cardiac surgeon, did a 10-year study on the incidence of scanning post dissection, and it was horrible. It was just horrible. So she decided that she'd do something about it, and she asked people to come to her so that they could ensure that the scanning happened every year or every 2 years as needed. And I had a CT scan, but my last one was an MRI. And then just this week, I had an echo stress test. So there are different ways, as you're saying, to read the heart and to read the aorta.
Yeah. Let's see here. Velta says, sorry. Jeanette says, wonderful, and thanks for sharing, Martha. Ken gave us a big giant red heart. Velda says, well, you did it. Congratulations, Martha.
I showed up to the party.
She says,
thanks,
you,
Velda.
Yeah, thanks
Velda
for
suggested
all
that
she's great.
Think of it as just talking with her. So
yeah,
it's a good conversation, Velda.
Every time. Thanks for all the information, Joshua. Raquel says, hi, Martha. How is your mental health?
I can say that it has greatly improved. That it was not good for a couple of years. The anxiety and depression, and just struggling to accept that this is how it was and this is how it was going to be. And really wrestled with it. And I was furious, really, and that detracted and distracted and so on. And part of it was feeling sorry for myself. But then I started to look around and I thought, yeah, there are a lot of people that have an illness or challenge. There are so many different ways in which people are affected. Others are affected. And so I thought, I don't need that. I don't need to feel that, and I can feel self-compassion without feeling sorry for myself. There's a difference.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and but it was really really difficult. And as I said, I'm on antidepressants, and and that helps, particularly with it's seasonal, and with winter coming, and the beginning of winter being the time coinciding with the time that I had the dissection, it's a double whammy, and I need to be conscious of that. I need to be ahead of that, because I don't want to get to a point where uh, you know it's gotten to, Winston Churchill used to call it the black dogs, and um, I don't want the black dogs to. I love black lab dogs, but I don't want the black dogs of depression to get me.
That's fair.
Yes, yeah. I I have. I'm a patient of a wonderful psychiatrist who has been um, who listens, really listens, I and involves me in my own care. So I think that's important, that whoever is offering therapy to you, that they're a good match, and that they're caring for you and allowing you to be part of that, so that you have agency as well. And yeah, I mean, with the anxiety and depression and the trauma and everything that's kind of wrapped up in one huge tangle, I think it's important to get the kind of help that you feel that you need, and to maybe ask a loved one um, to kind of keep an eye out, because sometimes they see things that you don't, and they can kind of help you to be aware of that, because there's something in us that says, "Oh, we can do it. We're fine. We're just fine." No, no. There are many many reasons that um, that the challenges become too big. That if there are more tough days than good days, it's time. And particularly heading into winter, as it is in Canada and the States. Now, if you're in New Zealand, you're heading towards summer, but you know we can't all go to New Zealand. Um, Yeah, in mindfulness, if you can find uh, if you can find a way of feeling safe and feeling gra- gratitude and and treasuring life. If there's something that does that for you, then fine. Then I would encourage you to do that. And mindfulness is a very strong. It it offers a road to to cherishing life, cherishing a moment.
I was going to, so bringing a moment, right?
Yeah,
Just appreciating that moment.
yeah.
Man, if I could bottle Tom's voice, oh, that guy, right? Uh, Jeanette and Nada's asking Jeanette and Natalie, do you both tell the doctors about it? Natalie says, I did, but they just told me to get some help. Donna says, me too. Donna says, Martha, that's a great suggestion. If they don't listen, then they don't want to help you. Raquel says, thank you. Um,
You're
and so I
welcome.
only have two more questions before I unleash the rage of the chat here. I understand that you have gone back to writing.
Yes, I have.
How do you feel about that?
Wonderful. There is a group that meets that is convened by somebody who is an editor and writer herself, and it's called PJ Writing. And every morning, every weekday morning, we meet online at 7:30, and we write until 8:30. And we're on Zoom all the time, but we don't say a word. And then we share. It's very odd, but and if you leave, you have to say, "Be right back," as though anybody would notice. But you know, you're accountable. And at the end, people share words among themselves, among the group or with the group. And I just found out that something I wrote is going to be appearing online. They've accepted it for publication, so that's great. And actually, three poems and an essay, and yeah, and I wrote something about it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was for the Globe and Mail, and it was a first person essay, and it was about uh, having gone through the dissection and looking forward to rehabilitation through the stroke unit, and then that being cut off, and and uh, and then just ending with, if I wanted to say anything to other stroke victims, that would be, we're going to be okay. And it was also reflecting on the pandemic that we were going to be okay. So yes, writing is really really important, and I look forward to it every day.
I can't wait to find out where this thing is going to get posted.
Well, I might let the cat out of the bag sometime.
Okay. And also, I understand that you've picked up music.
Yes, when I was at stroke recovery clinic, they asked what one of my goals was, and it was to be able to play flute again. And I do. I play in a concert band and play every week. And I I didn't believe I would ever be able to do that because I couldn't read music and I couldn't coordinate my fingers or hands. So there you go. Never say never.
It's all victory all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think that that's something as well, that it's the little victories. It's the little things that count everything you are able to do as a victory because you have a chance to do it. And yeah.
Well, we have a couple more comments here. Velda says, that is awesome to be writing again. I agree. Ken says, Martha, you are an inspiration, a survivor's survivor. Your story, still so emergent and worrisome. We appreciate that, Ken. We're looking forward to your story. Do you want to say goodnight to these nice people?
I do, and I'm looking forward to your story, Ken. Thank you so much to everybody who has been listening and has been sending hearts and sharing your courage tonight. I'm going to cry now. Thank you.